Hello, name's Troy. I'm 20 and 4 winters old, a tradesman's apprentice in the walled town of Aldmere. I split my days between learning accounts for the Guild of Merchants and repairing shattered trinkets and cracked-looking glasses in a cluttered little shop just off the market square. Not exactly the life of a knight or bard, but it keeps bread on the table. I rent a narrow loft above a Fletcher's ride, an old mare with a temper, and until not long ago my life was as plain as stale oatcake. The usual work shifts at the shop lessons at the guild hall, sharing ale with a few friends on moonlit evenings. Nothing unexpected. Then about a month passed, I met this lad Kyle, just turned 22. We crossed paths at the smithy when he brought in a snapped dagger to be reforged. We struck conversation quick and easy. Same wicked sense of humor, both fond of old tavern ballads, and neither of us cared for hollow courtesies. He mentioned I should come by his home one evening, said I could meet the fellows he lodges with, maybe wager a few rounds of dice or cards. I said I'd be glad to. What he failed to mention was that his home was his mother's keep. The first time I arrived was on a lazy sun's day afternoon, the kind where spring can't decide whether to dress in frost or bloom. I rode up to a tidy timbered house, 2 levels moss along the stone wall, and a red banner fluttering from the wooden beam above the door. Kyle opened it in rough-spun breeches and soft linen barefoot with a grin. "Come in," he said, waving me inside. "My mother's about, just ignore her." I stepped across the threshold, and that's when I saw her, his mother. And by the saints, I wasn't ready. She looked nothing like the picture that comes to mind when someone says my mother. She looked no more than mid-30s, if that. A simple gown fitted just so. Dark hair tied back in an effortless braid. No jewels. No. Just a quiet elegance, as though she belonged in some noble's household portrait. She moved like the lady of the house, graceful, natural, fully present. She filled the room just by walking through it. "Well met," she said as she passed from the kitchen hearth, eyes warm, voice smooth as silk. "You must be Troy." I stammered suddenly, forgetting every word of courtly manners I'd ever been taught. "A pleasure to meet you, my lady," she laughed soft low. "No need for my lady. Just call me Samantha." From behind me, Kyle groaned, "Mother, could you not enchant every friend I bring home?" She gave him a playful glance, and then she winked at me. "Point to Samantha." We made for the common room and began setting up a round of cards. She passed behind us once or twice, gathering dishes, tending to the fire. Kyle and I were mocking some fool at the shop who wouldn't stop prattling on about his new boots, and I laughed at something he said, and without thinking, I said it. "Gods, your mother looks better than half the maidens my age." I didn't even realize it left my lips until Kyle froze mid-shuffle, staring like I'd just confessed to loving his horse. "What?" he said. I turned, and there she was, standing in the archway to the kitchen, cloth in hand, lips slightly parted. I don't know if she heard it all, but from the look she gave me, half amused, half stunned, I'd wager she caught the jest, and then she blushed. Not crimson, no. Just a soft glow in her cheeks, a warmth barely visible beneath her fair skin. She turned and vanished into the kitchen again, but that look, that tiny smile she tried to hide, that stayed with me. Kyle looked mildly disturbed, maybe annoyed. I scrambled. "I just meant, she looks young for a mother, that's all." He gave a shrug, went back to the cards, but I couldn't. My mind kept replaying the scene. The blush, the glance, the silence. When I left later, she walked me to the door. "Glad you came," she said, voice lower than before, almost intimate. "Kyle needs companions who keep him grounded." "Thank you," I mumbled, hands stuffed in my cloak. "And, sorry if I said something foolish earlier." She tilted her head, smiling. "You didn't. It was kind." Then she opened the door and dismissed me with a soft wave. I stood by my mare for a while before mounting, hands on the reins, staring off. That smile, that blush. I told myself it was nothing. Just a moment, a passing spark of something strange. Folk don't blush over kind words anymore, do they? Maybe she was just being gracious. Or maybe I imagined it all. Then 3 days later, the parchment arrived, folded tight, wax-sealed. No name, no address, but inside fine script, unmistakably hers. "Enjoyed our little chat. You're more thoughtful than the rest of Kyle's friends. Write me sometime. S. I stared at the letter for a long while. Told myself, don't overthink it. She's likely just curious. No reason to stir the cauldron. Still, I inked a reply. And that's where it began. And that's where it truly began. The following 7th day, Kyle sent word through the boy who runs errands for the guild. Mother's preparing that veal pie I mentioned. You coming or not, I arrived near the 4th bell. Same cobbled path, same crimson banner, same timbered house. Samantha was in the kitchen when I entered, apron-tied sleeves rolled just so, and a bodice that made you question how a woman with a 22-year-old son could still carry herself like that. Troy, she greeted, flashing that knowing smile. Right on time. Smells divine in here, I said, nodding toward the hearth where something rich bubbled in a heavy clay pot. Samantha chuckled. 'Tis my indulgence day. I always make too much, so you lads had best eat like starved soldiers. Kyle was already in the front room, lighting candles and readying the board for a round of tiles and stones. I lingered, offering to help Samantha pull pewter plates from the hutch. At one point, she leaned close and whispered, "Thank you for not acting like I'm a ghost." She said most of Kyle's friends barely grunted a greeting, never really looking at her. I glanced over with a half smile. Rather difficult not to notice you. She paused for the briefest of moments, then turned away with a smirk. Good answer, she said. Supper was relaxed. The mood was easy, like the sort you slip into by accident. The pie was everything Kyle had bragged about, and more. Her crust was perfect, the meat tender, seasoned with something warm and sweet I couldn't place. Samantha sat across the rough-hewn table, sipping mulled cider, occasionally tossing out sharp remarks or teasing Kyle about forgetting his herb pouch at the guild. She didn't dominate the room. She simply owned it. After we'd eaten, Kyle excused himself to fetch something from upstairs, his ledger, or maybe a book of runes he'd misplaced. I rose to gather dishes without thinking. Samantha was already at the basin rinsing. "You don't need to do that," she said, glancing at me. "I don't mind," I replied, stepping beside her. "You cooked." She gave me a small smile. "I like you, Troy. You're simple." She caught herself, then added, "In a good way. Easy to be around. Most lads your age, they tire me." Then a pause, long and weighty. She stared down at the basin. "That thing you said last time," she began softly, "about me. Looking better than girls your age." I froze. She turned, meeting my eyes directly this time. The faintest smile curled on her lips. "You meant it, didn't you?" I cleared my throat. I did. Another silence stretched out between us. I braced for her to wave it off, to laugh, to scold. But instead she whispered, "Folk don't say things like that to me anymore." "Not and mean it." "I meant it," I said again. She gave the barest nod, "I know." And then the creaking of the stair broke whatever spell we were under. Kyle returned and the world snapped back to its place. But something had changed. The air had shifted. We played a few rounds of tiles and wagers, but I wasn't there. Not truly. My mind kept spinning back to that moment in the scullery, that look, that smile, that heat in the quiet. Samantha passed the sitting room a few times. Once she dropped a folded cloth beside me. Her fingers brushed my shoulder, just a flicker, but enough to catch. She didn't apologize, didn't look back. When I rose to leave, she walked me to the door once more, arms folded loosely, leaning against the frame. "I'm glad you came," she said. The lantern above her cast her face in that same soft glow again, like something painted on parchment. "Yeah, me too," I said. "Thanks again for supper," anytime she replied. Then her voice dipped low. "You know you don't have to wait for Kyle to send for you." I held her gaze for a beat, said nothing. She offered the smallest smile, and then slipped back inside, closing the door behind her like a secret. I stood on the stoop for a long while, heart pacing like a drum. The looks, the words, the weight of them. She remembered the compliment, brought it up, and she didn't flinch. Something was happening between us. I didn't know what, but I felt it. Then came Tuesday. Kyle sent a brief message through a passing courier, heading to grandmother's for a few days. "Mother's at home if you need to drop anything off." I didn't reply. Not right away. I wasn't sure why he'd even mention that she'd be there. That evening I saddled my mare and took to the road. No destination. Just the quiet need to ride. But somehow, I ended up back on that same street, outside their house. I told myself I'd just say hello. Nothing more. I knocked once. She opened the door wearing soft woolen leggings and a loose-fitting tunic, her hair twisted up in a hurried knot. No powder, no jewels, and she looked somehow more radiant than ever. "Troy," she said, surprised. "Thought Kyle might have kept you in the dark." I scratched at my neck. I was out riding. Thought I might stop by." She leaned one arm against the frame, smile tugging at her lips. "Or perhaps you were just hoping for more pie?" I laughed. That too. She hesitated. Just a breath, then opened the door wider. "Come in." She lingered in the doorway a heartbeat longer, then pulled it wide. "Come in." I stepped into the hall, familiar by now. Still warm, still scented with something sweet like crushed vanilla pod and cedar wood. Likely a candle burning near the hearth. She walked ahead, skirts rustling softly, heading toward the back where the small kitchen nook sat tucked beside the fire. I was just about to steep some elderflower tea, she said. "Want a cup, I?" I nodded, settling onto the bench beside the hearth. "That'd be good." We didn't speak much at first. The room was quiet, save for the hiss of water over flame and the crackling of logs. She moved about the space like it was part of her. Graceful, efficient, not rehearsed, just natural. I watched her hands as she worked, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the way she held the wooden spoon stirred with quiet focus. She didn't fumble or show off. She didn't have to. When she handed me my cup, our fingers touched just a breath too long to be chance. She didn't look away. We moved to the sitting room, just the two of us. No minstrels, no servants, just the two of us and the steam curling upward from simple clay mugs. She was the one to speak first. "You're not like the rest of his companions. I'll take that as praise," I said. "You should," she answered, glancing over. "Most of Kyle's friends. They can't hold a proper conversation if you gave them a script. But you look folk in the eye when you speak. That's rare." I gave a slight shrug. Maybe I just don't want to miss anything. That pulled a real smile from her slow genuine. She looked down at her mug, then, after a few seconds, spoke again. "May I ask something?" "Of course. That thing you said when you first visited, about me looking better than girls your age." She paused, then looked up. "Did you expect me to be angry?" I shook my head. "No. Honestly, I thought I just embarrassed myself." Her gaze softened. "I wasn't angry. Just surprised. It's been a long time since someone looked at me like that." I didn't reply. Didn't know what to say, really. Then, almost too soft to catch, she added, "And the way you're looking at me now, I've noticed that too." My pulse kicked up. I set the mug down gently. "Is that a problem?" She leaned back into the settee, crossed her legs beneath her. "Not a problem," she said, "just risky." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like the air was thick enough to touch. After a moment, I said quietly, "I don't want to cross the line." She tilted her head just slightly. "What if I'm the one moving the line? I'll remember that moment for the rest of my life. No raised voices, no bold declarations, just a shift. Something quiet and invisible had settled between us, and it was real." Then she stood. "Come with me." I followed her back to the kitchen. She pulled a dark green bottle from the cupboard and 2 glass goblets from a tall shelf. "Kyle doesn't care for mulled wine," she said, uncorking it smoothly. "But I do." We sat at the table, sipping slow. Her voice eased into something more open, more personal. She spoke of her past, how her husband had left when Kyle was still just a boy, barely 14, how she'd rebuilt everything from ruin, how courtship afterward had turned sour, how men wanted her for her looks, or the idea of her, but never the woman herself. "You're not like that," she said, looking at me now. "That's why you stand out." I hadn't realized how long I'd been staring at her lips until she whispered, "You're looking at me like you've got something to say." "I do." "Then say it." I hesitated, just a breath. Then I said it. "I've been thinking about you. A lot." She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on mine. Same here. We didn't kiss. Not that night, not yet. But the air between us, gone. The space gone. The world outside that little kitchen could have been burning, and I wouldn't have noticed. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the front door. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "Thank you," I said back, for letting me in. She opened the door, and just before I stepped out, she gently touched my forearm. Next time, she said, "Don't knock." And then the door closed behind me. I stood outside, in the night air, the moon peeking through clouds, just breathing, because something had changed, and we both knew it. She turned when she heard the door close. Her face didn't show surprise, only quiet relief. "I was starting to think you'd changed your mind," she said, lowering the flame beneath a small iron pot on the hearth. "I wasn't sure if you were serious," I said. She gave me that soft, unreadable smile. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't mean it. I stepped inside and closed the door gently behind me. The wood settled into place with a sound that made the whole house feel still, like everything had paused around us. I followed her into the kitchen, just as I had a dozen times before, except tonight everything felt different. She was stirring something pasta, I assumed, though it was spiced in a way I couldn't place. A faint tune played from the corner, a slow ballad plucked gently from a lute and a reed flute, the kind of music that feels more like memory than melody. "I can help," I offered. She waved me off with a flick of her hand. "You just rest. Tonight you're the guest of honor." So I took my usual seat on the tall stool by the stone counter, and I watched her move. She didn't try to impress. She didn't need to. When she finally brought over 2 bowls steaming rich and fragrant, she didn't sit across from me like before. She took the seat beside me. Closer. Just enough that our arms might graze if either of us shifted. The food was good, but we barely touched it. Talking came easy. She asked about my boyhood, whether I missed the coast, whether I ever thought of leaving Aldmere or the trade or even the guild. I asked her why she stayed in this place, what she wanted now that Kyle was grown and mostly gone. At one point I said, "You seem happy these days." She looked at me, truly looked. "I am," she said. "Right now. No thunder, no storm, just something plain and honest like truth, spoken without ceremony." She leaned in slow, deliberate, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. Our lips met, soft, tentative. A first touch, but sure enough to know it wasn't an accident. When we pulled apart, I whispered, "We probably shouldn't." She cut in gently. "But we already have." Then she stood, walked around the island, and reached for my hand. Without a word, she led me to the hearthroom. We sat on the cushioned bench near the fire just as before, but this time closer. Her knees drawn up beneath her gown, her shoulder lightly touching mine. "This can't turn into a real thing," she said softly. "I know." She stared down at her hands, twisting the band on her finger, a ring that wasn't even on her wedding hand anymore. "But I can't ignore how I feel when you're here. I haven't felt this in years." I nodded. "Then let's not name it," I said. "Let it be what it is for now." She looked up. Her eyes were different then, calmer, warmer. For now, she repeated. We kissed again, this time longer, this time no hesitation. When I left later that night, Kyle still hadn't returned. We didn't speak much at the door, just a look, the kind of look that says everything's different now even if no one else can know. The next day I returned to the shop as if nothing had happened, repaired a cracked mirror, logged a few accounts, polished silver. Kyle sent a message by mid-morning back on Saturday. I sent back a quick reply, a single inked thumbprint on parchment, as if it meant nothing. It wasn't nothing. Saturday came, and I returned to the house this time with Kyle home. He was the same as ever, loud joking, tossing bits of bread at me like we were back at the tavern. But Samantha, she'd shifted. Subtle things, the way her gaze flicked to mine across the table, the way her hand lingered a breath too long when passing me a drink, the way she'd smile just barely when no one else was watching. We acted like everything was normal, but we both knew better. Later, as I was leaving, Kyle followed me to the door. "You're coming next week, right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, casual as smoke. He leaned against the frame and gave me a sideways glance. "You and my mum get along weirdly well." My heart gave a jolt, but I played it off. "She's just nice, that's all." He squinted at me for a second, then shrugged. "Whatever. Just don't let her feed you too much. She only cooks like that when she actually likes someone." I gave a laugh. Hollow, forced, noted. As I stepped out onto the path, I looked back once, and there she was, Samantha, standing in the hall watching. No smile, just watching. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment nothing else existed. No walls, no titles, no rules. We were walking a dangerous line. And we knew it, but somehow it didn't feel wrong. It felt like the first time either of us had breathed in years. It's been 4 weeks since that night by the fire, since the first kiss, since we crossed a line neither of us meant to, and neither of us regrets it. And no, it didn't fall apart. There was no shouting, no heartbreak, no betrayal flung across a courtyard in front of stunned witnesses. It didn't explode. It softened. It deepened. It became something quiet. Something just for us. Kyle still doesn't know. Not for certain, but he suspects. I can see it in the way he watches sometimes. The boy's not foolish, but he lacks proof. And we've been careful. No parchment letters, no whispered rumors, no lingering glances across the hearth. When I visit, it's all the same, two companions laughing over dice and mead arguing about the latest bard's tale, tossing bread crusts at each other like squires in training. But when Kyle leaves the room or steps out to check the barn or chat with a passing friend, Samantha and I exchange a single glance. Just one. And that's all it takes. And when Kyle's not home, that's when we're truly ourselves. The first night I stayed over wasn't planned. He'd said he'd be out late meeting a merchant from the eastern route. I stopped by just as I always did. We sat in the hearth room, just the two of us. Her hair was down, no shoes. A soft robe hung over her shoulders. And there was something about how completely unguarded she looked, like this version of her belonged to no one but herself. I kissed her. She kissed me back. And she didn't ask me to leave. The next morning I woke before dawn and just sat there for a long while watching her sleep in the half-light. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't obsession. It was something quieter, something real. We never gave it a name, never branded it. But we found our rhythm. Once or twice a week, that's when we saw each other. Not too often, always on her terms, but never with hesitation. She told me once, "This may not last forever. But while it does, I want it to mean something." And it did. One evening we sat beneath the stars behind her house, sharing a bottle of red from the cellar. A wool blanket curled around her legs, her head resting lightly against my shoulder. "This feels dangerous," she whispered. I smiled. "That's because it is." She turned to look at me, eyes dark in the firelight. "Do you regret it?" "Not even a little," I said. She was quiet for a long moment. What if Kyle finds out I didn't speak right away? Didn't try to conjure some easy answer. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "Then we'll face it, together." And somehow, that was enough. There was something strange and perfect about those weeks, like we weren't living in the world everyone else was. Like we'd found this little crack in time and slipped through it, just the two of us. Age didn't matter. Her being 40 and 2, me 20 and 4, or the fact she was Kyle's mother. That part faded when we were together. We weren't a mistake. We were a secret. And a good one. Then came the close call. It was a 7th day. I came early thinking Kyle would be out till nightfall, but his plans changed. He arrived hours too soon. I was still there. Samantha didn't flinch. She didn't panic. She offered me a drink as if nothing were strange and asked, "You lads hungry?" But the air was thick. Kyle looked at us both differently that day. His eyes more focused, his mouth quiet. He didn't say a word, but I could feel it. That night, I sent Samantha a message. "I think he knows." She wrote back, "He suspects, but he won't ask. Not unless he's sure." "Should we stop?" I asked. She responded with a question. "Do you want to?" I didn't answer right away. I let the silence weigh. Then, "Not even close." Her reply came like breath. Come tomorrow. So I did, and we kept going, carefully, quietly, skillfully. Sometimes I'd arrive with some excuse returning a book. Kyle forgot checking a squeaky hinge bringing meat pies from the market. But it was always more than that. We shared meals, sat by the fire, told stories, laughed. And sometimes we didn't say anything at all. One night, I told her I don't know where this goes. She nodded. Maybe it doesn't need to go anywhere. Not everything needs a finish line. And she was right. But over time, the fear faded. The tension eased. People began to notice. Not overtly, but the glances lingered. A neighbor once saw me leave early in the morning and raised an eyebrow. Kyle joked one evening, "You've been coming by a lot lately. One of Samantha's old friends teased her still spending time with that guild lad, or is he there for you now?" I laughed it off. So did she. No one ever said it outright, but some knew, or guessed. And yet, no one forced it into the open. Now it's been several moons since that first kiss. Since we crossed a line no one marked, but both of us knew was there. Kyle has since moved out, lives with 2 other lads closer to the college grounds. We still talk, still share the occasional drink, but it's different now. The rhythm has changed. Samantha remains in the same house, still radiant without effort, still cooking enough stew to feed 10 men, still looking at me like I'm more than just the boy who used to come by with her son. Sometimes I stay the night. Other times we ride out together to nearby villages, places where no one knows us. We walk side by side like any other couple, like we're not unusual, like no explanations are owed. And in those moments I understood something. We didn't break the rules, we just rewrote them. She told me once, "This feels too good to be real." And I told her, that's how I know it is. We're not a tale of scandal, we're not a sin or a fantasy. We're just 2 people who found something real, in a place no one thought to look. And if protecting it means keeping it quiet, then it's the finest secret I've ever had.